So today, obviously, it's a big day today. Um, Zoran Mandani and also a governor of Virginia won as well. The Democrats did really well in the elections yesterday, and I want to sort of go over that in a bit more detail, and what I think it sort of means for the Democratic Party, because it was such a big positive thing, and being an Australian who really wants the Democrats to do well so we can get rid of not just Trump, but MAGA, because in my opinion, I think Trump isn't just a danger to America, he's a danger to the rest of the world. So I think the rest of the world um, really, really was hoping that the Democrats would do well. Um, and they did. They absolutely did really well, and I'm so happy with how the Democrats done. I thought Zoran Mandani was going to win, but it was really important that he got, I think, above the 50%. And the reason for that is because it gives him sort of like a mandate to do what he wants to do, which I thought was really, really important for him to get that win in there. And also just to see just the fact that I knew it would really annoy Trump as well, and which it did. It really did annoy Trump, and that was like an added bonus to what happened as well. So, in my opinion, I think there was a couple of reasons why I think Zoran Mandani did so well. In some ways, and I don't mean this in like a direct way, Zoran Mandani ran a not a, like a very different campaign to how Trump won in 2016. Oh, yes, that's the best part. Yeah, yeah, exactly, Paul. It's good to see. I mean, watching Trump's reaction when Zoran Mandani said in his victory speech, "Turn the volume up," which is basically it's the young guy and it's the old man. You know what I mean? It was such a great line. The I just want to say one thing about the victory speech. Um, a lot of Fox News has completely lost their mind over Zoran Mandani's victory speech. Was basically they were basically saying, that he was being too mean and he went after Trump and all this sort of stuff. Now, this is like brain rot at its worst. For weeks and months earlier, and then by the way, and then Trump, hi Evelyn, and then Trump, right? Trump says today, when he was asked on Fox News with Brett Baer, what did you think about Zoran winning? And he said, well, in his acceptance speech, he was really mean to me. So he was like, he was like upset that Zoran Mandani was mean to him in his victory speech, and he said he should really be nice to me, right? He should really be nice to me because I'm going to have to give him money, that sort of thing. Now, I think the interesting part about that is why would first of all, Mandani said if many times, and he said this, he said he's no Eric Adams. Yeah, that's right. He basically said, I am happy to talk with Trump. He said this so many times. If it's about cost of living and making it easier for the average New Yorker, he said that all the time. But I'm not going to work with you about sending the National Guard in and doing all that. Hi, Bob, nice to see you, and doing all that sort of stuff. Hi, Sandra, nice to see you again. Thanks for joining. Um, and, and all that sort of stuff. So I think Zoran Mandani was 100% right. Hey, Bob, nice to see you. 100% right, not to just right capitulate to Donald Trump, because at the end of the day, there was this argument from Cuomo that he basically said, the reason you should vote for me is because I'll stand up to Trump. And yet it was actually the opposite. The reality was the opposite. It was, if you wanted to stand up to Trump, the last person you should vote for was Cuomo. It was Mandani. He was the only person sticking up to him. I mean, to the point where he was endorsed by Donald Trump the day before. So the fact of the matter is, why would Trump expect the victory speech from Mandani to be like, "I love you, Trump. You're the best," and stuff like that? After Trump was calling him a communist, a terrorist, he was sharing videos of 9/11, right, saying that if you vote for him, you're basically voting for 9/11. Why would she show any respect for someone who said that to you and then complain that he wasn't nice to you? This is the Hi Natasha, good to see you again. This is the absurdity of the MAGA movement. They will call someone a terrorist, they will call someone a communist, they will call someone, complicit in 9/11. And then if you're not nice back to them, then you're a mean person. It's like, it's just the most like it reminds me of the whole taco thing. Trump, hi Joe, good to see you. Good to see you too, Natasha. It reminds me of the whole taco thing with Trump, where hi Marnie, it's good to see you again. Thanks for the love hearts. Love the love hearts. Thanks so much for that. Um, and it would remind me of the taco thing where Trump got really upset that people were giving him the nickname Taco, and he went on TV and he said, I don't understand why people would say something like that. And it was like the most hilarious, ironic thing. Now, Trump is notorious for giving everybody nicknames. Like that's all he does. He gives just derogatory nicknames to everybody, right? But then when someone gives him the nickname Taco, he has a meltdown. He's like, "Oh, it's really mean. Like, why would people say something like that? I mean, what a horrible thing to say about someone to call him Taco. It's just like, why are people so unkind? Why do people have to be so horrible?" And then 5 minutes later, he's talking about Sleepy Joe. He's talking about, everyone else, giving everyone else nicknames, saying horrible things about everyone. But if you say even like Taco's not even the worst thing you could say about someone, but to Trump, that's the hypocrisy of the MAGA movement, right? They are one of the most thin-skinned movements you've ever seen in your life. Really, really thin-skinned. And I think, I think Trump's reaction, MAGA's, he loves to dish it out, but he can't take it. Exactly, Marnie. Exactly. Yeah. It's amazing that for Trump, it's a compliment. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. Um, it's amazing how much how many of the people who voted for Trump were part of the whole Joe Rogan, podcasters. And one of the big things that they voted for Trump on was free speech. And one of the big things they voted for him is they're like, oh, you know, liberals are they're like snowflakes. They can't take a joke. They try to cancel people and all this other stuff. Now, even before Trump won the election, Trump sued Bill Maher, the comedian, over a joke because he made fun. He said that he came from orangutans. so, so this was before the election. He sued, and he didn't just threaten to sue Bill Maher. He took it all the way to the end. He lost, but it cost Bill Maher about $300,000 to defend it, right? So the person that Joe Rogan and all those guys voted for was the most thin-skinned guy on the planet, right? It's so ironic that that's the person they vote for. Then he gets in, and then he starts using the FCC to go after comedians like Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert to get them fired because they make fun of him. And he's even posted stuff like it's illegal, that's his words, illegal for comedians or late night hosts to be 100% against him. It's illegal, right? So whatever you say about Joe Biden never sued anyone because they made fun of him. Think about all the people. Oh, black screen. Can you still see me? Can everyone still see me? Someone can't see, yeah. Hopefully you can still see me. Someone just said black screen, but I'm hoping you can still see me. Um, and yeah, so a lot of those people were basically conned. I see. Thanks, Marnie. Thank you. I can't see. Yeah, thank you. It might have just been their screen. Yes, cool, great, thanks. Yeah, so a lot of these people were like just it's all based on vibes. Like JD Vance always goes around and talks about free speech. Before the election, JD Vance went on all these podcasts and he talked about how free speech is the great thing. Um, not that long ago, when Republicans, the Republican chat showing a whole bunch of young Republicans, they weren't even that young; they were like in their 20s and 30s. But JD Vance tried to pretend like they were like 14-year-old boys when the main guy was like 36 years old. So no, no, nice voice, black screen. Oh, wow. Okay. Yep. Nice voice, Blackstreet. Thank you. Thanks. That's yeah. Okay. Sorry that if you can't see me, I can I can see myself. So I don't know. I'll keep going. Just let me know if you can see me or you can't see me. Um, yeah, but I see you. Thanks, Sandra. It might just be a couple of people. Might just be a Substack thing because I think my screen is okay. It might just be Substack. Um, but yeah, I can see you fine and hear you. Thanks, Marnie. Yeah. Um, yeah, so I see Sandra. Yes, join. Yeah, so I think a lot of that stuff that we saw with Trump and all that stuff before the election was about free speech was all like kind of like it was BS. And I think a lot of people started to see it now. The interesting thing about the Zoran Mandani thing for me is that he got a lot of the young people back into voting for him, and that's not really a big surprise because Donald Trump went on a lot of these podcasts at JD Vance to try to get a lot, and they basically pandered to young people. They talked about free speech. They talked about, cancel culture. They talked about the Epstein files. We're going to release the Epstein files, all this sort of stuff. And it never happened. And to a lot of these young guys, they're not some of them are I'm talking about more people who are online. They're more interested in the culture wars than they are in economic things. So a lot of these people are disappointed in Trump. And what you saw in the Zora Mandani results in New York is that about 10% of the people who voted for him voted for Trump last year. So he brought along 10% of the people who voted for Trump. That doesn't surprise me at all, considering that he became famous when he started doing TikTok videos of going into areas in New York that overwhelmingly voted for Trump and then talking to them and asking them why they voted for Trump. And he was really respectful to them, all this sort of stuff, because a lot of them weren't like diehard MAGA people. These were not people with the hats on, going to rallies, basically putting sanitary pads on the ears, during the Republican convention. Remember, they all had those like pads on the ears as a bit of that was the most cultish thing, the most hilariously cultish thing I've ever seen is that picture of everyone, all those full on Trump supporters with it looks like women's sanitary pads on the ears, just looking up at Trump, just like he's their D leader, like beautiful. It's one of the most. For me, I love that because whenever a Republican or a MAGA person will say something about the Democrats like being like whatever. I will often post that picture to them because it's just a beautiful. For me, that picture encapsulates the MAGA movement, right? Just standing up, putting a pat on your ear, and then just like look, they would do anything for it, right? And so it's an embarrassing thing for them, but it's actually a real thing. And those people, right? That's not the people that Zoran Mandami was talking to. He was talking to more young people who weren't that political and voted for Trump just based on the economy, cost of living. That was it. It wasn't because they liked him as a person or that sort of stuff. It was just on cost of living. And he talked to them and he basically listened to them. He didn't tell them, he just listened to them, right? And it was really effective. And he got about 10% of those people to vote for him, which is actually a pretty significant amount. Um, and so I think it shows that cost of living is definitely the number one thing that's happening in America. And it's not just in America, it's in my country as well. Like cost of living. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is that people are voting based on what generation you come from. So young people are overwhelmingly voting right now more towards individuals who talk about cost of living. And the interesting thing about Zoran Mandani is that I think he could have been an independent and still won. He didn't necessarily win because he ran like a Democrat. He did run like a Democrat in some ways, but there's a lot of Democrats who didn't like him. Like a lot. Andrew Cuomo was kind of like even though he was an independent, he was kind of running as like a establishment Democrat, right? Who sort of caved to Donald Trump. So the interesting thing I found about how Mandani basically ran this election is in some ways similar to how Trump did. I want to compare them like as people; they're very different. But just in Trump, if I have to give respect to Trump, is that he's very good at marketing. He knows how to word things, slogans, that sort of thing. He knows how to get people's attention. And in this day and age, getting eyeballs is better than spending $20 million on a TV ad, right? Where am I from? I'm from Australia, Kendra. I'm from Brisbane, Australia. Yeah, yeah, I'm an Aussie. Sorry, I know you probably came on here, Kendra, and you're expecting to hear like an American accent, but I'm an Aussie who's a bit obsessed with American politics. Yeah, try to overcome that. I know it's a bit weird. Pretend like I'm speaking with an American accent. um, yeah, I know. I often get criticised, even from some people on the left, like, "Why do you care about American politics?" Anyway, I just do. I just do. Um, but yeah, so I think the interesting thing about th what we see, I love that you are an outside opinion. Yeah, and look, Sandra, I think the interesting thing about outsiders, the Aussie accent's a million miles better than any American accent. Really? Okay. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I can speak a little bit of American if you like me to talk. That's a really bad accent, isn't it? That's really bad. Yeah. I When I try to speak with an American accent, I think I sound like I'm from the South a little bit, like, "Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I bet you. Yeah, it's awful. It's awful." But I love it when I hear an American do an Aussie accent. I think if you can pull off an Aussie accent and you're American, I think that's amazing. Yeah, because I think the Aussie accent is actually a really hard accent to do. Yeah, because there's a lot of American actors. Oh, sorry about that. You just fell down. Let me just put that there. A lot of American actors will, let me just fix that. A lot of American actors will basically talk a lot, try to do things with an American accent, an Aussie accent, but doesn't come across as well. So, wait a second. There you go. I fixed it. Yeah, so it doesn't come across as well, but I think it's easier for Australians to do American accents. I can do British accent, Aussie accent a little harder for me. Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think the Aussie accent's like one of the hardest. And also because you kind of like the way I think Aussie. This. I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard someone say that the reason the British started talking like like Aussie, because obviously we were colonized by the British, is nice meeting you. Really enjoying it. My first time coming here, I must say. Oh, thanks, Kendra. Thanks for that. Yeah. Um, and nice to meet you too, Kendra. And I'm assuming, Kendra, you're from America. Yeah. But yeah, the thing is, they reckon that the Aussie accent started talking like me is because when the British first came to Australia, we have a lot of flies in Australia. I know that sounds gross, but Australia's a really hot place. Like it's very, a lot of places are hot in Australia. So obviously flies are attracted to, when it's really hot. So when you have a lot of flies around you, not that everyone, we're talking about like hundreds of years ago, right? And the British colony came here. You try to keep your mouth closed when you talk because you don't want a fly to come into your mouth. So apparently that's how the Aussie accent started. So people were talking with a British accent, but they were trying to keep their mouth closed, and that made them sound like we do in Australia. So I was like, "Top of the morning to you." Yeah, try, yeah. And then suddenly, after a while, you'd say, "Here you go, mate. Yeah, yeah, strike, crikey, crikey." And from somehow, we went from talking like, the Queen of England to talking like Steve Irwin and like Paul Hogan. It's a big transition. But apparently flies had a lot to do with it. So so the evolution from the Queen and the King of England to Steve Irwin was flies. Yeah. So that was a big part of it. So big contribution to our accent was flies. That's a bit embarrassing. Let's forget that I even said that. I'm not even sure if that's even true. I think it's true. I think it's partly true. I think part of it is true, but a lot of it might be lies. I don't know. I read it on Facebook, so yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, so basically, what was I saying before? Fellow Republic, yeah. So basically, I think there was a sort of a similarity between Zoran Mandani and Trump in a sense of when Trump in 2016 was campaigning in the primaries, he was attacking all the other Republicans and he was calling them neocons, and he was calling them establishments people, and he was positioning himself as the outsider, the anti-establishment guy, right? And in some ways, so Trump wasn't just attacking Democrats, he was attacking Republicans and Democrats, and he was the outsider. If you look a little bit at how Zoran Mandami has actually campaigned, in some ways, I think it was in his advantage that Cuomo stayed in the race and he was fighting against another Democrat, right, as well as a Republican, because he was going less hard at the actual Republican Silva than he was actually at Cuomo, obviously because Cuomo was a bigger threat as well. Um, so I think from that point of view, it was interesting to watch, and it did remind me a little bit of, obviously a different person, different the way he talks, but just in terms of the approach, was that both Trump and Mandani both went against the establishment Democrats at the same, but also against Trump as well. So he was the outsider, not against both parties. And I think there's a lot of attraction to that. I think a lot of young people don't see themselves as Democrats and they don't see themselves as Republicans. They more see themselves as them versus, maybe more establishment people, maybe older people, not all older people, some older people. And so when Mandani said during the speech, turn up the volume, in a sense, he's saying, this is a new generation. You need to turn up the volume because this is a new generation. He picked up that young people, not just young people, but immigrants, people who'd been ignored before. How many times during an election in America did you see people target people from Asia or, from India or Pakistan or all these countries? Yet some of those countries have the biggest amount of immigration coming into the United States. The amount of people coming from India and Pakistan and Asia is huge compared to European. So he's tapped into a group of people who were being ignored. Two groups of people that were being ignored: young people and immigrants from Southeast Asia, that sort of thing, or just immigrants in general. So he really tapped into that. It's interesting that a lot of the things that he enjoys is very similar to what things we enjoy in Australia. Like for example, cricket. He likes cricket, which is like a sport that is played in India, but that's where he would have got that. He also enjoys football, which is soccer. He talks about the World Cup soccer coming to New York next year. He was showing up at soccer games all around New York and stuff like that. And by the way, soccer is the number one sport amongst young people in the United States. Once you get past 18, it's not. But for young people, soccer is, and that's probably because a lot of parents don't want their kids to play more violent sports like NFL. They want them to play like soccer because it's less dangerous. So a lot of parents will get their kids to play soccer because it's less dangerous, but then it doesn't take off after that. So he tapped into a lot of things that is not mainstream America, but is actually used by a lot of people. Soccer is a very big game, but nobody talks about it, right? Southeast Asia has a massive community, especially in New York, but nobody talked about it. He ended up winning the vote from black people. He did that by going on a whole bunch of podcasts. He did the same thing that Trump did. He went on this show called the Andrew Schultz. Andrew Schultz runs a podcast that is run by the podcast called Fragrance. And that Andrew Schultz guy is a good friend of Joe Rogan, and he's a comedian, and he has a massive podcast, and he's based in New York. So he's really, really a New York podcaster. And Zoran Mandami went on his show. Now, many people didn't talk about that, but it got millions of views. And in that hour and a half that he spoke, now remember, this is important, Andrew Schultz voted for Trump at the last election. So these aren't liberals. They're people who voted for Trump, like Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan was once like more left and all their podcasters, but he went on a show hosted by a guy who voted for Trump, who's become disillusioned by Trump, and he talked on that podcast for an hour and a half. And to me, I've watched all of Zoran Mandami's videos, and that is without a doubt his best one. They go into detail about every policy. By the end of it, Andrew Schultz looked like he was about to endorse him. It was brilliant. And so a lot of that show's watched basically to podcast based in New York. It's watched by an incredible amount, shitload of young men, specifically in New York, and he won the young people vote. So there is, in a sense, um, didn't Mandani win like 78% of voters? Yeah, he did. Yeah, that's right. I think, yeah, he did. He won a large percentage of young voters. So a lot of the things that he was doing was a lot of people who don't watch those shows, like the YouTube shows or the podcasts and stuff like that. They would have gone amiss. But he was everywhere. He was on CNN. He was on MSNBC. He was on Fox News, right? Which he did. He did fantastically on Fox News as well. He did really well. Um, he did everything that Kamala Harris should have done last year, right? So I think there is a lesson to learn here from what he's doing, and I think in some ways, as I said before, he did not copy, but do you remember at the first debate, right? Remember in 2016 when Trump was debating Hillary Clinton, and in the crowd, Trump's administration, Trump's people brought in women who said that they'd been sexually harassed by Bill Clinton, and they were all in the crowd. It was a stunt, right? It was a stunt. So what did Zoran Mandami do? In the first debate with Cuomo, he basically he said, "There's a woman in the crowd right now who said that she was sexually harassed." Like, it was like there was, you know what I mean? He did a similar thing to Trump did, right? Where he brought in a woman who accused Cuomo. Now remember, Trump did that with Hillary Clinton and her wife. They picked up on something, right? They were picking up on something. I think a lot of people are missing what he was doing. He was taking the things that worked, that got eyeballs, that got people's attention, that Trump does so well, but he didn't. But he used it for the good, not for the bad, like Trump did. So he's in a sense, he's basically said, I'm gonna go after Cuomo as a Democrat, establishment Democrat, right? So again, he's not again, distancing himself from establishment people, right? He's now the outsider. Secondly, going after Trump again, and this is the great thing. He turned the outsider Trump into the establishment. And he did that by saying people like Trump, and then he'd talk about Cuomo. Like, he didn't make it a Democrat Republican thing. He made it yeah. Oh, there it goes again. I don't know what's going to. There you go. Yeah. So he didn't make it a Democrat establishment thing. Sorry. Yeah, he didn't make it just about Democrat versus Republican. He made it about, he wanted to be the outsider for the Democratic Party, but also the outsider for the Republican Party as well. And by tying Trump, right, by tying Trump to Cuomo, to billionaires, to all this sort of stuff. And one of the great things that Zoran Mandami said about Trump is that Trump diagnosed the problem in terms of Trump diagnosed the problem about cost of living, inflation. Remember, in 2024, that's all he talked about. He talked a lot about inflation, about cost of living. He said he was going to bring it down after day one, all this sort of stuff, right? So he did that. And so Zoran Mandani said he diagnosed it correctly. But the problem is that he never did anything about it, right? So in a sense, what he's saying is he's saying to I think a lot of times when he's talking, he's not talking to Democrats. He's talking to independents, and he's talking to people who don't care whether he's a Democrat or Republican, but he's talking to people about moving outside. By saying he diagnosed the problem, he's in a sense saying he was right about that, but he had no solutions for it, and he was lying to you, right? I think that's a really, really smart way to play it, because again, so much of I think it was amazing to see Zoran Mandami use Trump tactics, right, and Trump marketing skills, which are pretty good. I've got to be honest. You've got to admit, in 2024, Trump was very good at marketing and that. And Mandami basically flipped it, and he turned Trump into the insider. He turned Trump into the establishment, and he is now. The only negative thing about this is I think that since COVID, there has been a thing about the outsider versus the insider, right? And a lot of people, I think, um, since COVID, there's a lot of things at the moment where incumbency, if you're the incumbent person, this is not just in America, but all around the Western countries in the world, right? If you're the incumbent, you're blamed for everything that goes wrong. And you're blamed for all the problems, right? And then someone else comes in, they're the outsider. And then and if they haven't been in politics before, or, someone like Zoran Mandami has never been in politics, they don't have a past. So you can't look at that past and say, yeah, but you did this and that, because he doesn't have a past. And so in a way, you have an advantage these days as being the outsider. Now, the problem is if you win, you then become the insider to some degree, right? So then what happens if Zoran Mandani gets in and he can't do the things that he thinks he can do? And then the next person, let's say it's a Republican, then comes in. My God, I've got to get that fixed. Yeah. And then that person then comes in 4 years' time and then says, well, Zoran Mandani came in and he said he's going to do all these amazing things, but he never ended up doing those things. So, in a sense, doing what Mandani is now doing to Trump, which is basically saying, you said you were going to do these things, but you never did it. What happens if Mandani can't do those things? Not because he doesn't want to, but because it's maybe more complicated, or he can't get things through because as the mayor of New York, you don't have full control of everything. You've got to get help from the governor. You've got to get help from groups to increase taxes. It's not all up to him. Mandani was an assemblyman. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but an assemblyman is not like most people don't know who an assemblyman is. That they're not really. They don't really look. Nobody thinks, oh, assemblyman. It's more of a sort of. It's not a well known thing. So I think from that point of view is the problem with this whole post COVID, or not even post COVID, but 2016 Trump of insider versus outsider is once you win, you become the insider, and if you don't do what you said you're going to do, it's very easy for then a Republican to come in 4 years and go, well, he's now the insider because he's been there for 4 years, and things would have gone wrong because there's no way anybody can become a mayor of New York, let alone the mayor of the small city, without anything going wrong. There are things that are going to go wrong, and they might be able to, but what's going to happen is that the New York Post, Fox News, and all these people are going to blame Zoran for anything that goes wrong. Anything that goes wrong, they're going to blame you for it, right? And I think that will become that could become an issue. I'm just being realistic. Yeah, I'm not saying that I want him to succeed. I really want him to succeed because, for one thing, as an Australian, a lot of his policies are not as extreme as some people in America make it out to be. Like, yes, he's a Democrat socialist. I'm not. I'm a social democrat, right? So, social democrats are mostly in Australia. Social democrats are in Europe, Scandinavia, all those countries, right? Nobody thinks Australia's a communist country. Nobody thinks Finland's a communist country, or Sweden, or France, or anything like that. A lot of people look at that model and they're actually envious. If you ever go to Scandinavia, their infrastructure is amazing, and that's because they pay a little bit more tax, right? So I think a lot of people went over the top. I think the other thing that helped Zoran Mandami win as well is the fact that the more he was attacked, the more he became the outsider, right? And that worked to his advantage. So do you remember in 2016 and 2024, even last year with Trump in 2024, the more he was attacked, right, the more people went after him. Like, he went to court, he showed up in court, he showed up in, all the indictments, right? He was, then there was the assassination attempt, all this sort of stuff. It created an environment for people who don't follow politics closely. Like, for us, we know those indictments were real. He deserved to go to, go to court, all that stuff. We know that, right? But for a lot of Americans who don't follow politics closely, they might have started to get the feeling that everyone was after him, and therefore he became the outsider again, right? So, it's like they're trying to kill me, they're trying to send me to jail, all this sort of stuff. So he became the outsider again. So the more Trump was attacked last year, in some ways it made him more popular. So in some ways, Zoran Mandani, same thing happened. When Fox News and even establishment Democrats and all these people started attacking Zoran Mandani, saying he's a communist, he would laugh if there was another 9/11, which is a horrible thing to say, right? He said all these really horrible, they said these incredible things. He wants to bring Sharia law in. I mean, Zoran Mandami is like the most woke Muslim on the planet. Like he's like hanging out with trans people. Even during his speech, he made a special mention to say his trans friends, right? The trans community. He made one of those internal government attacks ongoing. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah. Hi, Dave from California. Good to see you. Good to see you again. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of those attacks that were happening against Trump in 2024 that we saw, and I think it worked in his favor to some degree. It actually worked for Zoran Mandami. The more they attacked him, the more popular it became. Why? Because he became more the outsider. And this is the whole politics now, right? Politics now is about insider versus outsider. It's about young versus old. It's about, you know, um, people, and it's not so much about Democrat versus Republican. I think there is some of that. There's definitely some of that. But if you look a lot of MAGA supporters, they don't actually like a lot of Republicans, right? They don't like Dick Cheney. When Dick Cheney died the other day, they'll celebrate, right? So they like Trump. They like MAGA, right? So it's not so much Republicans, if Donald Trump became an independent, they're not going to vote for a Republican. They're going to still vote for Trump. So again, I see that with Zoran Mandami. Um, I'm glad that Zoran Mandami is a Democrat because, in my opinion, as an outsider from a social democratic country, not a Democrat socialist, a little bit different, I don't see a lot of his policies as extreme. In where I live in Brisbane, Australia, last year, right, the centre left government, so when I say this, it's not the federal government, not like Trump, the state government, like your governor. So, but here they're called the governors of my state, Queensland, in Australia, and I'm in the capital city, Brisbane, is run by a premier, which is like a governor, right, in a bit. And they had an election, and the centre left government brought in 50-cent fares. Like 50-cent fares means you can catch a bus or a train, and it's 50 cents one way and 50 cents back. And now those trains and buses, you could go to places an hour and a half away. So that's a really big difference in price compared to what you paid before. And you can go an hour and a half on a bus or a train. So it's all buses and trains, and it's 50 cents either way. Now, the centre right government were going, if you bring that in, it's going to bankrupt the state. It's going to destroy this. It was like it's almost what you saw when Zoran was talking about free buses. And not only did it not bankrupt the state, it when eventually the centre right government won the election, the next election, it was so popular that because when the centre left government brought it in, the 50-cent fares for the buses and trains, it was a pilot. So it was a trial. They did a trial, right? They wanted to see if it worked, right? And so again, very pragmatic. And by the way, can I just say this about Zoran Mandami? When he talks about those grocery stores in the deserts, that's also a pilot. That's also a trial. And people never think about that. The more you hear Zoran talk on long-form podcasts, the more you realize he's actually very pragmatic. He basically said, we're going to try these in deserts. If it doesn't work, they're out. I mean, that's pretty pragmatic, right? That's not a communist person will just go, we're going to put him in no matter what, right? He also talks about deregulating the market. He talks about less regulation for small businesses. He talks about less regulation to build homes. Like he talks about the abundance thing from, Ezra Klein. He talks about we need that plus rent control. We need both. That's pretty pragmatic. So again, I wouldn't agree on rent control unless you've got more supply, because I think I think that wouldn't work. I think eventually that might push the prices up and landlords would leave. But he's not saying that. He's saying we need more supply and and in the meantime, we're going to do this. Again, pragmatic, not crazy, right? So again, I think people take him out of context. And I think because he did so many long form podcasts that were not necessarily super left wing, like the Andrew Schultz one, a lot of people were seeing not just the clips on Fox News or on X or whatever, they saw what he was saying. And when you listen to him, he sounded pragmatic. He sounded like common sense. He said if things don't work, he wouldn't. If it doesn't work, then I'm chucking it out. I'm not going to keep going. And he sounded not that far off from someone you would see in my country or Finland or Sweden. But the reason why Trump, so I'll just go quickly back to the train thing. The trains and buses for 50 cents each way became so popular that when the centre-right government won the premier in our state of Queensland, he kept them. And not only did he keep them, he took them off as a trial and made them permanent. That's how popular they were here, right? So whether it's 50 cents or free or whatever they want to talk about, it is definitely a positive thing, to have cheaper fares, because what we found in Brisbane is a lot of young people who want to go to university can now go to university and they can live further away because, like America, Australia is quite expensive to rent and to buy a home for young people. And so now they can live further out because when I was growing up in the 90s, I went to university. I could live in the inner suburbs of Sydney. I could go to university full time and work part time. I could still live in my own unit, right? But with my girlfriend at the time, and we would still have a decent life. Like we weren't rich, but we had a decent life. There's no way a young person could live in the suburbs of Sydney or maybe New York and go and they'd have to go out to the burbs and then they'd have to travel a long way to go. Now, at least in Brisbane, they can travel and it's only $1 either way, right? So what 50 cents one way, 50 cents back. So $1 for the whole trip. And as I said, that's trains and buses, and that's like an hour and a half all around Brisbane. So you can go for long distances. So again, I just want to give you an example of something that the centre-right government in Australia lost their minds about. They didn't say communism, but they went, oh, this is like, you can't do this. And it worked. And it worked so well that the centre-right government brought it in. So a lot of his policies, they're more pragmatic than people realize they are. And the best part of what he says is he always says, if it doesn't work, I'm gonna chuck it. So that's only in Brisbane, nowhere else in Australia. No, unfortunately not. No, it's only in Brisbane. I would love for it to be in other places. I think the reason, so Sydney is our biggest city in Australia. Brisbane's like our third biggest city, so it's not like a small city. The reason I think is because the trains and the buses in Brisbane have been around for a long time. As we're in Sydney, in the last 3 or 4 years, they've done a massive upgrade, like a massive upgrade. They now have like driverless trains in Sydney. You can go on a driverless train, and they go really fast. They're very efficient. They're incredible. You should see them. You still have the normal trains, but now you have it, and a lot of it's underground. So you can go from one side of Sydney to another side in like a very, very fast, quick time. So now the reason, so when they built that, they did it with, part of it was funded by the government, but part of it was funded by private industry. So those private, hi Dave, not say, those private businesses who funded the trains upgrades in Sydney, they did that. They have to get paid back. So it wouldn't work in Sydney because they have to pay them. Otherwise, the government would have to pay those back, and there's like interest and all that. So, but in Brisbane, we haven't had that in decades. So it's all been paid off. Yeah. So I think eventually it would be good to have that in other states like Melbourne and Sydney. But again, we have healthcare, which is, I think, our healthcare. Like, you don't hear stories in Australia of people, going bankrupt because they went to get to go have an operation or something like that. So we do have a lot of other advantages, things like that. But yeah, look, I think the Zora Mandami thing was one of the reasons he won is because there was so much calling him communist, saying all these horrible, saying that he's a terrorist and all that sort of stuff. And okay, thanks for explaining that. Yeah, yeah. So a lot of those things, I think, you know, actually helped him, right? Because they went too far. They went too far. They pushed it too far, and you just noticed it. I could see it. I could see him becoming more and more popular the more unhinged they became about his criticism. Because there's a lot of people in New York, especially young people who voted for him overwhelmingly. They're not watching Fox News, right? Young people in New York are not watching Fox News. They're probably not watching MSNBC. They're not watching CNN, right? They're not watching cable news. They're not watching any of that. They were on TikTok or streaming services and stuff like that. And he was or he's on Reels on Instagram, and he was killing it on all those platforms. So the people could go directly to him to get information. Again, he was showing up on podcasts and all that. So and all it made it do is it made it look like Elon Musk, Bill Ackman, and all these billionaires. I mean, it backfired on them, right? Donald Trump, Bill Ackman, Cuomo, some established Democrats, they became like the super establishment party, right? Yeah. And then you started seeing a connection between Trump and parts of the Democratic Party, right? So you start seeing people like Eric Adams and Cuomo, and then you think, oh, wait a sec, they don't hate Trump as much as they pretend to be. You know what I mean? They don't. They actually, in some ways, they prefer Trump, right? They prefer Trump to Mandela. They made that clear. Now, I don't know if Chuck Schumer prefers Trump to Mandela. I actually don't know that. I like to think that he doesn't, but I actually don't know that for a fact. I don't know for a fact that people like Chuck Schumer or Hakeem would prefer Trump. I actually don't know. And I think part of it is that they're worried that that Zoran Mandami coming into the midterms, that the Republican Party and Trump will paint them all as radicals. I think they're wrong, and I'll explain why I think they're wrong. First of all, I don't necessarily think Zoran Mandani would do just as well in Virginia or Pennsylvania or somewhere like that. I actually don't think he would do that well. I'm not one of those people who think Zoran Mandani could do well anyway. Because if you look at some of the other races like Virginia, the governor there was just a centre left person, and she did quite well. So I think I think from that point of view, I but that doesn't mean you have to throw Zoran Mandami on bus. I don't understand how Democrats think, right? Because it is he was showing up in person hours at night, meeting people. Yeah, exactly, Coral. Exactly. Yeah. He was doing old school. He was doing a combination of old school. Hi, Kimmy. Nice to see you. He was doing a combination of old school politics, which is going on the street, but he combined it with social media. So he was on the street, but he combined it with social media. Hi, Kimmy. Yeah. So it was a great combination to see someone on the street. And he did that thing where he'd always say, I'm not here to preach to people. I'm here to listen to people. And that is such a big thing. Hi, Nicole. And that is such a big thing when you do that, when you say you want to listen but don't preach. I think that was a fantastic thing that he did. So I think where I think Democrats are wrong is I do think they're right in terms of I don't think Zoran will do. You can't just replicate Zoran all around America because I actually don't think that would work. I think you should have a big tent. In Australia, you have a centre-left government who has people in that who have parliamentary people, like Congress people like you would have. And how that person's politics is or their outlook depends on who they're representing. So if you have someone in our Labor Party, which is centre-left, right, and they're representing someone in the inner city, that member or that parliamentary person will be a very progressive person. Why? Because they're representing very progressive people. But if you go out to the outer suburbs, right, and it's the same political party, the Labor centre-left party, they will be a different person because they're representing different people. So in my opinion, that's what what people like Chuck Schumer should say. Instead of being so frightened that somehow the whole Democratic Party is going to be painted and Republicans are going to have a hard time painting Madami as a villain. He's always happy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. He comes across as the nicest guy in the world. First of all, he's not a communist. Secondly, his policies aren't that radical. He's always smiling. It's not going to work. Let me just make one before I move on to the other thing. Let me just make one prediction, and you can bookmark this. Come back to me in like a year or two if I'm wrong. I could be wrong because in the 90s, when someone I knew was first using the internet, like in the 90s, and they were telling me what the internet was, and they had like a lap computer there, I said to them that will never take off. That won't take off. So I haven't always been right about everything. So just take that with a grain of salt, what I'm about to say. But um, I think in a year or two, there are going to be more people on the left disappointed with Mandani than people on the right. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, I don't think he's not going to be as radical as probably the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, wanting to be. In fact, I was watching some of the people from the Democratic Socialist America, and they were in the last couple of weeks were starting to criticize him for sounding too liberal, right? So, and I knew that was going to happen, right? He's keeping Tish, the police commissioner. He's reaching out to people, which I agree with. I think he should do all that, but that will piss some people off on the left, right? So, right, yeah. So I think he will have more criticism from the left in a year from now than he will from the right. But the people who called him a communist and Sharia law and all that, they're going to look pretty silly, right? They're going to look pretty silly when none of that happens, right? So I just want to say that I think he's going to cop more shit from the left than the right in a year or two from now. That's how crazy I think the criticisms from Trump is. And that's how crazy I think the Democratic Party are looking at this. They're looking at this, again, this is the Democratic Party who last year campaigned like it was 2012 before the internet, before the social media existed. This is not the party to look for they are frightened that Mandani is gonna push away all moderate voters or centre left voters. No, all you say, if I was a Democratic person, all you say is we are a big tent. We have room for Zohran Mandani, and we also have room for Chuck Schumer, right? We have room for a whole bunch. Why? Because America is not just Democratic Socialists, and it's not just moderate people like, or even Joe Manchin was, right? We are a party that represents a whole bunch of people. And someone who we represent in New York will be different to who we represent in Virginia because the constituents are different. What's wrong with that? If you are in charge, if 70 million people or 80 million people are voting for you, you can't expect all those 80 million people to all think the same. You're going to be getting people, if 80 million people are voting for you, but grassroots damage just shows how out of touch Democrats are. Yeah, exactly, Marty. Yeah, exactly. The idea that you would only have Mandani point of view in the Democratic Party or you'd only have Chuck Schumer, to me makes no sense either way. Because America doesn't all think like Mandani and America doesn't all think like Chuck Schumer. So why not have a Big Ten party that represents all those people? And by the way, the Congress people are representing people in their district, right? So that's all you say it. Like that's the way our centre-left government campaigns here. We have people in our centre-left government who you will have one person who would consider almost a Green supporter, like quite progressive, and another person on the right who you sometimes go, that person could be like in the centre-right party, right? So, that's it. Let me just say this. I'm going to cop shit for this. I think Joe Manchin was better in the party. My politics, I'm way to the left of Joe Manchin. But would you rather have Joe Manchin in West Virginia or a Republican? I would rather have Joe Manchin. Why? Because he passed the infrastructure policy, right? He got the one of the Supreme Court people to into what are the people liberal into the Supreme Court. So even though I don't agree with those policies. A couple of things that he did were big things that helped Joe Biden. So why would you not rather have him? Because the only alternative to Joe Manchin was a Republican. So I'd rather have him than a Republican, even if he just gives me 5 things that I want. Yeah. So that's the way I look at it. I'd rather, my politics is closer to Zoran Mandani, but I'd still rather have Joe Manchin than a full-on Republican any day of the year. So I think this, but I never hear the Democratic Party talk about a big tent. Why don't they say we're a big tent, right? And why don't they defend Zoran Mandani? He's not a communist, right? And they're obsessed with the problem is I think a lot of this stuff has to do with Israel and Palestine. They're worried about people in the Jewish community who are, because of things that he said in the past. Now, I have seen, hi T, all I've seen in the last couple of weeks is I've been on Substack, right, in the last couple of weeks. And I did an article where I criticized Nick Fuentes, the far right wing guy. He was interviewed by Tucker Carlson, and Nick Fuentes is not, you can call a lot of people Nazis, but this guy is actually a Nazi. He's not a Nazi because I guess that he's a Nazi. He's, hi, Jonah. He's a Nazi because he calls himself a Nazi. He says he loves Hitler. He says he doesn't think black and white people should be together. He said women like being bashed and raped. He's actually said this stuff. And more importantly, he's never taken it back. It's not like he said, I said this stuff when I was 18, I no longer will, but he still believes that stuff. So he goes on Tucker Carlson's show, and Tucker Carlson basically gives him a hand job. It was the most ridiculous interview I've ever seen in my life from extremes. And the Heritage Foundation comes out and says, well, we love Tucker Carlson and we should, and although we don't agree with a lot of things that Fuentes says, we should invite him into the tent. So I wrote an article criticizing that interview with Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, not because I don't think he should have interviewed him. It's fine to interview him, but if you're going to interview a full-on Nazi white supremacist, you might want to ask some questions not just go along with the whole interview he agrees with him. And the thing is that then they tried to tie people in the Republican Party, tried to tie Nick Fuentes on one side and Zoran Mandani on the other side. They would do both. They'd say they were basically both the same, right? Party's endorsement, like Cuomo used to have the tag, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So they tried to tie, sexual. Yes. Yeah, exactly, Carl. They tried to make Republicans and, people with Fox News, they tried to say, yeah, Nick Fuentes is bad. It's not all of them. Some of them did. And then other people would say, oh, but also Mandami is bad. They're both anti-Semites. No, there is absolutely no. And by the way, when I wrote this, for the first time since I've been on Substack, which has been about a year now, I had people come up to write to me publicly on my notes or that, and even DM me privately. And I can't even say what they said, but let's just say they're not a fan of Jewish people, right? They obviously were Nick Fuentes fans, and they came after me with threats of violence. That if I ever step foot in America, that the same thing that happened to Charlie Kirk would happen to me. That I'm a Jewish person, a Jewish bang, 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 whatever. And they weren't saying it in a good way. And so I never had that before. I've had MAGA people on Substack, but nothing like that. I've never had anything like that. And they were all over my DMs. It wasn't just one person, it was multiple people. No, it's all right, Sandra. And I mean, I wasn't I'm on, the thing is, I've been on Twitter for years. So to me, it's not a big deal, because on Twitter, you hear that stuff every day. It was just unusual because it was on Substack. Because how I experience things on Twitter and how I experience things are usually very different. So it was almost like Twitter had come into Substack, and I was like, yeah. And so the way I reacted to it was, I thought, So the ones who threatened me, I just basically contacted Substack and told them about that, and then they were gone. The ones who basically just one of them just kept asking me if I was a Jew the whole time. Are you a Jew? Are you a Jew? Are you a Jew? And I would just come back and I would say something like, you know, I think his name was Graham. Graham, I'm starting to get a little bit of a hint because he called me, he said, call me a Jew. And he said that the Holocaust wasn't real and that if it was real, he would like for me to be in that Holocaust, right? So it was pretty bad. And then I said to him, Graham, I might be way off here, but I'm starting to get a slight hint that that you might not actually like Jewish people. And he came back to me and he said, it's not just a hint. I hate Jewish people. So I just thought by joking, like making fun of him, it might do well. But then when I did that, right, he went to my DMs and then started going there into that spot. So, but again, it was just a weird experience to have, just by writing one article, going after Nick Fuentes. So, and the other thing is when I was being attacked like that, um, I'm actually not Jewish. So I'm an atheist and I was brought up a Catholic. So my parents brought me up as a Catholic, but I'm an atheist now. So I thought about it and they kept saying, are you Jewish or Jewish? And I refused to answer it because I thought if I said maybe they're coming from here because they ran out of people to harass on Twitter. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I'm also on Twitter. So I'm wondering if they followed me over. I don't know, because on my Twitter account now, I do have my Substack thing. So I don't know. But I just, I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of saying I'm not Jewish because then I feel like I'm buying into it by saying, oh, no, but I'm not Jewish. It's like I'm endorsing what they're saying. It's like, oh, don't come after me. I'm not. So I didn't say that. So I didn't say I was Jewish. I just didn't say anything. I just made fun of it. It's none of their business. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, but when I refused to answer it, it was like, well, not answering it means you are, right? Now, so I don't know. It was a weird experience. And it was a weird experience because these were people, when I looked at their accounts on Substack, they weren't new accounts. Some of these people had like 400 or 500 subscribers. So they're not massive, but they're not like some random account that just opened up today. They've been around for a while. They're interacting with a lot of people. They've watched my videos. They knew I was from Brisbane, Australia. I've never said I'm from Brisbane, Australia on any of my notes. I've only ever said that on here. So they've actually watched my videos. And so, yeah, it was a weird experience. I just thought I'd share that with you. And not that I care. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not like, I'm not a smoke. It doesn't bother me. But it was just an interesting reaction because I've been on Substack for a year and I've never had that. Like if it was on Twitter, I wouldn't think about it because it's just that's something that's so common on Twitter that you don't even like think about. But it was just the environment, that I was in was very different. But again, it's like they were trying to conflate again the Nick Fuentes groypers, like Nick Fuentes supporters, they're called groypers, right? And they're generally like young guys, right? Young dudes. And what I find interesting is that Nick Fuentes said before that he used to criticize Charlie Kirk all the time, and he said about Charlie when Charlie Kirk was alive, and he said that you know what he said what Charlie Kirk is afraid of is that about 30 or 40% of people who are in Turning Point USA are actually groypers. And he said that again on on when he was interviewed with Tucker Carlson. He said about a 30 to 40%. I still do not understand the groyper stuff. Marnie, groypers is just a name for what Nick Fuentes fans call themselves groypers. It's just something they call themselves groypers. Yeah, it's just a name for his fans for people who support Nick Fuentes. Yeah. So a lot of that stuff, right? Is I don't know how true that is, but when you read all those messages that came from the young Republican Party, right? The chats, and they weren't even that young. They were, as we said before, they're like in their 30s, and they were saying, "I love Hitler." it makes me think that Nick Fuentes might not be lying. Maybe Nick Fuentes is telling the truth. Maybe there's a significant part of the young Republican Party who are groypers. Now, remember, Nick Fuentes isn't just, I'm against immigration, I'm for this. He's way beyond that. He is like full blown, the Holocaust didn't happen, all this sort of stuff, right? So if he's saying that 30 to 40% of young MAGA people in the leadership are groypers, that's a big problem, right? That is a massive problem because this, again, this isn't just some right wing radical. So I think there might be some truth to that. And I think that's why the Heritage Foundation and people like Matt Walsh, right, came out and invited Tucker Carlson and said nice things about Tucker Carlson and said, we don't agree with Nick Fuentes, but we want to invite him in to have a conversation. And I think the reason they did that is because they actually do believe that a lot of people who follow him are actually in Turning Point USA, which is supposed to be like a mainstream Republican for young people, right? So if Nick Fuentes has a lot of control over that group, that's why they're inviting him in, because that's basically without his group, there's not much left. It gets shut. 40% of people just disappear. So it is, again, but I think the fact that people connect will say you have Nick Fuentes on one side and you have Zoran Mandani on the other side is ridiculous. It is not true at all. They are not at all the same, right? I have never heard Zoran Mandani ever come out and say things like black people and white people shouldn't be together. Women deserve to be bashed and raped. They not only do they deserve it, he says they like to be. He said they like to be. This is because of social media, a bunch of that's right. Exactly, Sandra. Yeah, social media. Yeah. And yeah, and so basically he says all this stuff, but Zoran Mandani doesn't say any of that stuff. And in fact, whenever he's asked about Jewish people, he makes a point of saying, I hate it. He gives examples of horrible things that happen to Jews. He couldn't do it. He's very sad and scary that young men are being indoctrinated into the hate groups. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, T. I agree. And I will say this about young men because I have a son who's young, right? He's 20, 19, 20, that age group, right? And I will say that I think the left could do better of appealing to those groups because everything I see online and everything people my son's age see online is all gravitated towards the right. Andrew Tate, right? Nick Fuentes, there's a whole bunch of them on Twitter and podcasts, and they're all right wing, and they all try to gravitate or they try to appeal to young men, but I don't see a lot of that from the left wing parties. I don't see a lot of and in some ways, sometimes left wing parties going to be too critical of young men, and then by being too critical or not letting them make mistakes, we push them not push them, but in some ways they feel more, they can joke more on the right, they can make mistakes on the right, and they don't get as punished for it. So the thing about JD Vance is JD Vance said, I'm not, remember those leaks came out, Republicans, and he said, well, I'm not going to cancel people or destroy people's lives because they said stupid stuff when they're young. So I don't disagree with that, right? Because I'm not a big cancel culture person. I never was. The problem is that it's so hypocritical, right? Because on the show, and Heritage knows it, not free speech, hate. Yeah. What JD Vance never says is he has a contradictory view for the other side. When Charlie Kirk was killed, it was a bad thing what happened. Charlie Kirk was killed. Some people on the left online were making memes and jokes about it. They weren't inciting violence. They were saying they don't care, right? Now, he said any person on the left, anybody who's caught mocking Charlie Kirk, everyone should ring their bosses and get them fired. That's cancel culture. So on the one hand, he wants to ruin people's lives who mocked Charlie Kirk, but on the other hand, the Republicans who were saying they love Hitler, they love the Holocaust, he was saying, well, young people say stupid things. Again, this contradictory view. I actually don't think it's working for them anymore. The Republican Party and the MAGA movement have lost the higher ground on free speech and all that, especially when they went after Jimmy Kimmel and Cold War and stuff like that. But don't, Adam Mockler is telling us on the left to be more like regular bros and be edgier. Yeah, I don't think you have to. Here's the thing: I don't think you have to be. You don't have to become like MAGA to. But I think young people, young people do say stupid things. I'm going to say this: I'm so glad that there was no social media around when I was like 15, 16, 17, because I'm sure I said stupid stuff. I can't remember, but I am absolutely sure I said stupid stuff. And had I had a Twitter account, I might have written something really stupid on Twitter back then, right? So so for me, I have sympathy for young people, right? Because they're living in a time, we lived in, a lot of us, I don't know how old you are, a lot of us lived in a time where we don't have that past to go back to, right? By the time it came around, we were older and more mature, so you're less likely to say stupid stuff, right? But if my son or one of his friends said something stupid online, I wouldn't want those people to be killed, Mate, you and me both, Joe. I'm glad it wasn't around when I was growing up. Exactly. But that's why I have sympathy for young people. And when JD Vance says, I don't want to see young people ruin their lives, I agree with that. But unfortunately, he wants to ruin the life of people who make fun of Charlie Kirk. So you can't have it both ways. I don't want people to be ruined, whether you're right wing or left wing. If you're 16 years old and you're saying stupid shit online, sorry, but your life shouldn't be ruined because of that. Yeah. Because when I think of myself as 16 and I think of myself now, it's like I'm thinking about two different people. Like it's not even the same person anymore. So again, I have a lot of sympathy for that sort of group. I think the only thing the left could do better is Charlie, I feel the same way too, Joe. Yeah. And I think, I think there was a period a couple of years ago when the left became a little bit too censorious online. I'm not talking about Democratic Party. I'm talking about random people on the internet where they would share videos of a comedian making jokes and going, oh, this is all, like it's a comedian. Like, I don't get upset at comedians making jokes. Even if I find a comedian offensive, I just don't watch them. It makes that easy. So I don't see the big deal with comedians making jokes. It's subjective as well. And young people are attracted to edgy comedian jokes. And if people on the left are saying, don't watch that, don't watch this, don't watch that, oh no, stay away from that. And the people on the right going, hey, there's some really edgy, funny jokes over here. Young people are going to go that way. I'm sorry, but they want the edgy stuff. They want the comedy, they want that stuff. They don't want the safe stuff. Now, if you go back to the 90s, right, it was the other way around. Political correctness was a right wing thing. The right wing, and it was comedians on the left who were getting cancelled for saying edgy things in the 80s, 70s. All these comedians from the old days were getting because they made fun of God or they said Jesus, and it was all people on the right pearl clutching because they were very religious about comedians saying people on the left. So I don't really like it the other way as well. I think it's mostly an online thing. But again, you don't have to, you can be offended. That's fine. I think it's perfectly fine to be offended. I think it's perfectly fine not to want to see something. And I think the words cancel culture don't even actually mean what it means anymore. Cancel culture used to be you try to get someone fired, you try to ruin their lives. Now it kind of means like if you criticize someone, you're canceling them. That's not cancel culture. I'm old enough to remember when you used to buy a newspaper, right? And there would be like a review section in the newspaper, and it would give you like 1 star about this movie, right? Don't go watch this movie. Don't go watch this movie. This movie is horrible movie. Whatever you do, bang, bang. Now, that was before people talked about woke. No one said back then that was woke because that was just criticism, right? You criticize someone, you don't want to go. Now, if someone writes like a review about like, it's like, oh, what's wrong with you? You're trying to cancel him. Like you're trying to ruin him. He's like, no, he just didn't like his show. Like there's a difference between saying you want to ruin that person's career and you don't like, if you go to a comedy show and you don't like it and you tell everyone that you don't like it, that's not cancellation. Trying to get that person fired from a job, that's cancellation. But they're two different things. So, and I think social media, Donna, I consider myself woke as well. I'm 100% woke, but I'm also not I'm also not. I don't want to force my ideas onto somebody else. Like I'm an atheist. When a Mormon comes knocking on my door, right? I I don't want to hear it because I'm not interested in what they got to say. But at the same time, I don't want them. I don't want to stop them from doing what they do. Just let's just not, let's not interact. Okay, all right. A Mormon once in Australia, I went down for. I used to be a smoker when I was younger. I went down for a cigarette where I was working years ago, and a Mormon came up to me. He was an American guy, so they have those little Mormon things because they're American and they come around Australia and they knock on people's doors. And he came up to me while I was having a cigarette at the front of my work. I think I was like 23, 24, and he said, "Have you ever thought about God?" And I said, "Oh no, I'm an atheist. I'm not interested." He goes, "Oh," and then as he was walking away from me, he goes, "Have a nice time in hell." And that always it's like have a nice time in hell. Just because I said I wasn't interested in like knowing about God, I was like, that just stuck in my mind, right? That's stuck in my. And as he walked away, I just thought, I don't care that you believe in God. My family are massive Catholics, right? I was brought up an altar boy. I was an altar boy. I used to go to confession twice a week when I was a kid, and they'd force you to go to confession because I went to Catholic schools. They would force you to go to confession, and when you're like 10 years old going to confession, you would go in there and you would say, "Hi, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 1 week since I've made a confession." So I'd have to go in there twice a week to do confession. And when you're 10 years old, you haven't really done a lot of bad stuff. So especially when you have to do it twice a week. So I would go in there and I'd say, I lied to my parents. I don't even know if I did lie to my parents. I probably didn't, but I didn't have anything to confess because it'd been like 3 days before I'd been in there, and I was 10 years old. So what could I have done? And he'd say, okay, do like 20 Hail Marys, three this, and then I'd have to go outside the booth and like sit on my knees, which would really hurt, and I'd have to like do this, but I wasn't actually really doing it. And then 3 days later, I'd have to go back to confession, and then I'd say to the priest, sometimes I'd run out of things to say. And I didn't want to always say that I lied to my parents because it just sounds so repetitive. So I would say to the priest, the last time I was here 3 days ago, I lied to you. I told you that I lied to my parents, but I lied to you instead. I never actually lied to my parents. And then he would just go, "Oh, okay. So you lied. Yeah. Well, that's 16 Hail Marys, couple of these ones, couple of that." He didn't really care. It was like he was on automatic robot. I don't even think he was listening because the fact that I told him I'd lied to him 3 days, he didn't care. It's like, "Oh, okay, great, 6 Hail Marys, bang, 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 you're out next." It was like a assembly line in a factory. It was like really weird, and like getting 10-year-olds to do confession twice a week is like a really bizarre thing. But I was really into it because my parents were very Catholic, and I was going to a Catholic school, and so I just went along with it. I became an altar boy, so I would hold those things. During church, I would do the gong. I'd go boom, so I had to know when to do the gong. I know no wonder you're an atheist. Oh, sorry. Oh wow. Do you know what? Can I just say I can't believe God. God did that. See what happened there? Sandra said, "No wonder you're an atheist." Then I laughed, and then my phone fell down. I don't think that's a coincidence, Sandra. I don't think. I think that came from God. I might reconsider my me being a atheist now. That was quite scary. It just happened exactly that time. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I have a lot of religious people around me, and that's cool. And so I never mind it. But I've always found it that people who are religious are more evangelical than they are the other way around. God is watching you. You're right, T. You're right. He is. Yeah, he's not happy. He's not happy with me because I was like a full on religious person as a kid. And the funny thing is, I never told other people to be religious, and I never tried to push it on to other people because in my home, my parents they would have like pictures of Jesus all over. It's just Jesus was all around our home. Like in my bedroom, we had like three pictures of Jesus. I'd wake up in the morning and the light would come in, and it'd be like the sunlight, the rays, and it would go right onto a picture of Jesus. And it felt like Jesus was coming into to the room in the rain. And one time I was like really bored because this was before social media. I think I was like 14, and I was staring at the wall next to me. Right, I was staring at the wall next to me, and I started imagining that I could see Jesus in the war, like just the imprint of him. Like I just convinced myself. It's amazing. Like when you become really religious, you start convincing yourself of things, of things that aren't real, but because you believe in it and you believe in it so strong. Oh my god, that would freak me out. Yeah, the 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 Ray thing coming in tea. Yeah, it was weird. It was weird. Like it was very religious family and stuff like that. But you know, it did turn like me atheist. It turned my brother atheist, so my brother became an atheist too. So yeah, so I think too much religion is actually like can turn people the other way. But going back to the thing about like you know, Zoran Mandani and Nick Fuentes, who's obviously like a white. I think freedom of religion is like what John Lennon said. Yeah, exactly, Coral. And the thing is, PTSD. My dad was a Sunday school teacher, but we had no religion type pictures hanging on the wall. I consider myself agnostic. Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people are kind of agnostic these days. They don't know either way for the like stuff like that. Um, I will say, like, even though my parents were very Catholic, um, a lot of Catholics back then, they were very working class. So my parents were very left wing into because Catholicism and working class back then was actually like a bit of a thing. Like a lot of times when they had strikes, the Catholic Church or the Catholic people would come and give food to the people on strikes and stuff like that, which is always unusual to me because the way Christianity is looked at in the MAGA party is more like almost like Jesus only cared about rich people, right? It's a very different type of Christianity that I experienced when I was growing up, where it was about helping some people who were poor. Because when you go to church, they always talk about the downtrodden, the poor people, but you never see that from the MAGA movement. It's like completely the opposite. It's like we're for the rich, everyone else for themselves. Jesus was like, yeah, everyone like that. And I'm saying that as an atheist, but like from what I was taught in school and church, what I'm seeing under MAGA is like the opposite of what I was taught about God and Christ and all that sort of stuff. So it's really strange to see them like try to use that. Could you imagine Jesus saying like, "Let's build a wall. We need to build a wall to stop the poor people from coming in. Let's only invite." Because remember, Trump said, "Let's only invite the richest people into the country." Could you imagine? Darn it! I'm at a social thing, so I have to watch this later. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for that. Yeah. So again, like I was like, it's weird because like I can't imagine as someone who knows a lot about the Bible and stuff. I can't imagine Jesus ever thinking we should only allow rich people into their area or or allow only some people in. It's a very opposite thing, but and then they fixate on the gay thing. The new style Christianity started in the 80s. Now it's totally different. Yeah, we actually have that here. That new style of Christianity. It's more like the new style of Christianity is kind of like remember Tony Robbins, the inspirational guy, like the motivational thinker. That's kind of like that's the new Christianity in the right wing movement is like the old motivational speakers like Tony Robbins. It was all about pick yourself up from your bootstraps. It's all about money. God helps those who help themselves. So pick yourself up. It's all that stuff. It's all about making money. All that. And even if you go into some of their like churches, like we have one in Brisbane here, they're more like Pentecostal, evangelical type things, like where it's all about the money. You go in there, they have like a little store in there, a little where you can get souvenirs. It's like a massive souvenir stores where you can get all these God pictures. At only like $350, you can get a picture of Jesus. $400, you can get a necklace. $700, you can get this. It's all about money. Apparently Jesus was like a super big like corporate like Christian guy, marketing, is a big marketing dude. so it's a bit weird seeing that sort of Tony Robbins motivational speaker. Yeah, the souvenirs are amazing. Yeah, like the souvenirs. I went into the shop I went in there just for the laugh, and I saw stuff in it, like they had rubbers, like for your pencil, and on the pencil, it had like a Jesus thing, and you'd rub it, and then suddenly Jesus would get smaller and smaller. The other thing I really liked is they had one of these things where on the one side you'd have white, like it was red liquid, and then when you turned that upside down, it went through, it turned into water, and you could do it the other way around. So you'd have water up the top because Jesus apparently turned water into wine, and then you'd flip it, and then suddenly it'd go red, and you'd see the wine. It's like, wow, that was on special for $150. So that was a bargain. So absolutely, they care about people. The guy who was running the church, because he's been on Australian TV, he drives it around in a brand new Porsche. Like so he's got a brand new Porsche, but he's big on telling people he's big on telling working class people and poor people and homeless people that the worst thing you can do is patronize them. Don't patronize. You're patronizing homeless people by telling them not by giving them money. So that's what he would say. He'll press that. Buy the $300 thing so he can drive around a Porsche, and he's happy about it. And he's not trying to hide his Porsche. It's not like he's driving around in a 1980s like escort car. He's proud. He's got pictures on the internet, and this is my Porsche, and his wife looks like a supermodel. So it's just amazing. Yes, his commercial. Jesus erase some water into wine toy. I've heard it all. Yeah, it's amazing stuff. Yeah, I mean, Jesus, had he been around now, I think he would have been all for this stuff. All that stuff. Yeah, it's the new Christianity. It's the new Tony Robbins. Even like Dr. Phil. Remember Dr. Phil from like um, Oprah, and now Dr. Phil is a big MAGA supporter. He goes on ICE. He joins ICE to go after just sorry, just what is going on in your country? And how is it that Dr. Phil, who I used to watch, I would watch Oprah. So when I was in high school, I would watch, and I took a day off school and I was sick. I would love to watch Oprah, and then right after Oprah would be Dr. Phil, and it was always like Dr. Phil. It was always like tough love and all that sort of stuff. And then somehow this guy has become one of the big sites, like a reality TV doctor. So in a way, it kind of makes sense, right? Because Trump is all about the reality TV stars, or should I say the orange side money? That's right, money. Yeah. Um, Trump is all about reality TV. So everyone, he's got Dr. Oz, who's like a reality TV doctor. He's got Dr. Phil. Me too, Jump. I'm just like the same age. Yeah, me too. Must be the same. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Shows you can make it. Yeah, So Trump's cabinet is sorry, is made out of Dr. Phil, psychiatric doctor is now part of MAGA. Dr. Oz is now part of MAGA. Phil Hegseth is like Fox News is now part of MAGA. It's like his whole team is like it's so crackers, Chris Chan, all the outfits, Dr. Oz, right? He's the winner. Yeah. Like his whole team is either young like people like social influencers online, or ex TV stars, reality TV stars. His whole thing, and of course Trump, and then anyone who passed the screen test, exactly, Nicole. Yeah, and anybody, and coming from Trump, he was also a reality TV star. The whole thing is just crazy. Like if they actually in the 90s had made a movie about Trump and what we're seeing right now, but it was in the 90s and we haven't experienced yet, people would just go, that was funny, but that would never happen. You would think like that was funny, but that would never happen. Do you remember like Michael Moore, right? Who did like Fahrenheit 9/11, that sort of like lefty guy in America, did documentaries and all that. And he did a he did a documentary once called Canadian Bacon, and it was like a comical satire. It's really nuts. No wonder his administration is totally incompetent. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, and the book Canadian Bacon it was based on the fact that America will come up with stories to preempt going into war, like, weapons of mass destruction. It's a preempt. So this particular book was satire. So it used the most extreme version. And the Canadian Bacon story was that America came up with a reason to invade Canada, right? So, and he did that he never thought that would happen. He never thought that was going to be real. So he used that as an extreme version. Yet now you have Trump who wants to annex Canada. And it's like weird. It's like a lot of the shit that people made fun of and made jokes about in the past is like there's some truth to it now, right? Greenland. Could you imagine anyone in the past who said they wanted to invade Greenland militarily? Again, another, like, who, no one would believe that. They just think it was crazy. So again, it's just like this really bizarre, like, Trump administration who just they've normalized crazy things, happening all the time. They've normalized lying, they've normalized conspiracy theories, they've normalized being a reality TV star, they've normalized Dr. Phil going around with ice, um, talking to people, telling people to leave the country, even if they've been there for 20 years. Canadian history is hysterical. Nobody ever thought it would be real, but here we are. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. So he's normalized that. He's normalized Dr. Oz giving us medical advice about autism. Um, he's normalized so many crazy things that it's like it's beyond parody. Like you can't. It's almost like you can't make fun of something because it's already parody. And I think in the future, if there's anything good that's come out of it, and I think about this with Zoran Mandani, is that before Trump, like I don't know if you remember, the first election I really watched in America was, I think it was 2004. Howard Dean. I don't know if it was 2000 or 2004, but Howard Dean was a Democrat, and he was a progressive Democrat, and he was running in the primaries, and he was coming first, right? He was actually coming first, and I was thinking, cool. There's this like youngish Democrat. He's like progressive and he's winning the primaries, right? And then he does this speech and he does this screech. He elevates his voice and he goes, ah, or something like that. It was like really mild. After that, the media jumped on it and they said, oh, that was weird the way he screamed at the end. It was like really mild. And because of that, he had to withdraw, right? If you go back, you can watch it on YouTube. Put in like Howard. I remember that crazy loud sound, Howard David. Yeah, yeah. But it was like Marnie. Like if that happened now, nobody would care about that. It was just like it was nothing, right? But so basically, he loses the primary over like his voice cracking, right? It's like like a 12-year-old boy's voice cracking, right? The elections yesterday showed that we're not as stupid. Yeah. So he loses the election. Now, in my opinion, that was a stupid reason, right, to lose the election. So, but Trump has taken that, and now there's almost no, there's no bar. The bar was too low before, for people doing like silly things or just for something they did maybe when they were, remember, like you had to have like a completely clean slate. Like if you smoked marijuana, you'd be gone, anything. I think the bar was too low. Now there's no bar, right? That's no bar. So the thing is with Zoran Mandami, the reason it didn't work with Zoran Mandami, and the reason it's not working with other Democrats on the left who have had a past, right? Who said things in the past or they've made mistakes in the past and things like that. Things that before Trump they would have been kicked away. Now it doesn't really matter anymore. So when they went after Mandani and they showed posts that he made 5 years ago about defund the police and all these other things that he said 4 or 5 years ago, the bar is still much higher for Dems though. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that, money. I think it's still fine. But the thing that I noticed is the Democrats are too worried about that bar. The establishment Democrats are too worried about that bar because I think that bar is actually much higher than Democrats realize it is. But because Democrats are usually safer and more conservative in terms of those things than MAGA is, not the old Republican, but MAGA is, they're too worried. This is why I think they're all having like hyperventilating about Zora Mandani, because they're still in that mindset of Howard Dean in 2004, where just screeching would lose you. So now they're thinking, well, we need to distance ourselves from Mandani because Mandani has said stuff in the past that we don't like. But the problem for Democrats is this is a completely different landscape. This is not 2004. This is not 2012. Most people do not care about that stuff anymore. Most people don't, right? There's other people there was a guy with a Nazi tattoo, right? I can't remember his name. I know who he is, but his name's just like me. He had a Nazi tattoo. He didn't know it was a Nazi tattoo apparently, and things like that, right? And he then got it taken off. Now his polling is going up, right? His polling is going up, not down. Again, I think the bar is higher than Democrats realize it is. Democrats, of course. Now, let me say this: if you do have a Nazi tattoo, but you didn't realize, Graham Platinum, sorry, thanks, T, that's what I meant. If you do have a Nazi tattoo and you got it when you were in the military or whatever, because the thing about the Nazi tattoo, because I saw it, is it's not a swastika. If it was a swastika, you would have to go, well, how could you not know? But it was actually a skull and bones, which is, so when I saw it, I didn't know it was a Nazi tattoo. And I saw Fox News, 4 people on Fox News looking at the tattoo, and none of them knew it was a Nazi tattoo. So I have no idea. He did this in 2007. He was in the military. He was with other people in the military. They all got it. Apparently, the skull is a common thing to get, but apparently this particular one was more of a Nazi thing. But in the military, they checked your tattoos to make sure they're not offensive, and he got checked and they didn't say anything. So maybe they just don't care. But I will say is Democrats were like, now he's come out and he said he didn't know, he's apologized, all this sort of stuff. Now, a lot of people were thinking he would be gone, but he's not gone. Zora Mandami said some stuff 5 years ago that I probably wouldn't agree with, defund the police and stuff like that. He apologized, right? And people moved on, right? So I think the bar is much higher than Democrats, even for Democrats, right? That doesn't mean you just bring in any candidate who's got the dodgiest. I don't think that's a good idea. But what I'm saying, actually, there was another guy in yesterday's elections. His name covered, and he had posted some horrible things about saying that he wanted to kill his opponent or his family. I think he was joking or something, but it was pretty bad. Again, he also won the election. So there is so much evidence now of people on the Democratic side who have said things, done things, who they later regretted and stuff like that, and it didn't affect their electoral chances, and it went up because Trump has proven that in this day and age, where not everyone is watching the same news, people are more open to people making mistakes. People are more open to Trump. And the thing is that Trump normalized that to some degree. I think he normalized that way too much, in my opinion. Politicians, but it's MAGA politicians get away with lying, and many times it's a slide with that coin. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. The thing is that Trump gets away. Guess it did very well. Yeah, exactly. Trump gets away with a lot more lying, and Trump gets away with a lot more crazy stuff. Democrats would never get away with what Trump gets away with, because Trump is graded on a curve like a toddler, right? And Democrats are not graded on the curve. However, if you have a candidate, who comes in and doesn't act like an establishment Democrat and says, you know what, I said crazy shit in the past, I said bad things in the past, you know, I don't like it, but I did it, and I smoked pot, took some cocaine, I did all that. Just come out and said that. I guarantee you, even a Democrat these days would probably their ratings would probably go up. Yeah, corporate media loves Trump and they hide his dementia. Yeah, exactly right. So I do think these days, you even Democrat, I think Zoran Mandani has proven, and also the other people, the other people winning in thing has proven that people you can get away with a lot more than you used to. Even Democrats can get away with a lot more than used to. The problem is if you have someone who has done something in the past, right? Who's maybe forgivable. Obviously, there's a limit to what they do. Someone does something awful, awful, then obviously that we shouldn't have that. But if it's something they said or tweeted about 10 years ago, you can get away with that these days. Absolutely. Even Democrats can get away with that these days, as long as you don't cave into the media. If the media comes up to you and says, you need to apologize, you go, you know what? I already apologize. Complete authenticity is much more popular than exactly, Marnie. Exactly. Authenticity is what it's about. When you try, if you come in and you try to be perfect, like I'm a perfect, I don't say this, I've never said this, and I said that, you're going to be held to a really high standard. But if you come in and act authentic and you act like, yeah, I've said shit stuff in my past, I did this, I did that. If I was going to get into politics, I would come out day one and say, I'm not going to criticize other people for saying bad stuff because I'm sure I said bad stuff. You inoculate yourself, right? It's a smart political move to do by not by not pretending to be above, right? By not pretending to be perfect, by admitting that you've said stupid stuff, by admitting that you've made bad decisions, by admitting all this stuff, you inoculate yourself from anything in the future that could happen. But stupid stuff doesn't matter. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the best thing to do is to come out and say, yeah, when I was young, I did some really stupid stuff. Then everyone moves on, right? And the people looking for stuff about you, like the ops trying to find your stuff, you've already put it out in the open before they've gone to look for it, right? It's a really good political technique. And I want to give you an example. In Australia, years ago, right? Years ago in Australia, there was an election, and the guy who was running for election was a centre left guy called Kevin Rudd. He's now the ambassador to the United States, right? And he was running for the election against a right wing conservative. And during the election campaign, they found out that Kevin Rudd had been at a strip joint in New York, right? So he was at a strip joint. The media, Rupert Murdoch in Australia, they got dirt on him and found out he'd been a strip joint. He went to he went to his team, the Labor Party, and after this story came out, he said, "Look, if you want me to resign, I will resign." And they all laughed. You know why they laughed? They said, "This is going to make you look more human. This is going to make you look more authentic." And he was like, "No, they just found out I went to a strip joint. No, this is going to appeal to a lot of working class people." And you know what? His polling the next week went through the roof, right? So, an example of someone, right, who was so worried about it that he was willing to resign to take one for the team. But, because a lot of guys were like, I've been to a strip joint before. Who cares? He's now one of us, right? So again, authenticity is not a bad thing to be these days. I think it can be a real positive thing. And that guy went on to win the election by a massive amount. And by the way, it wasn't because he went to a strip joint, but I'm just saying it didn't work against him. So I think there's a lot of that stuff that the Democrats could do. I think being a big tent is also a great thing. Yeah, but I also think before I go, thank you everyone for coming. I did want to talk about a couple of things as well. Thanks, Evelyn, for joining. The other thing I wanted to talk about was is George Santos. Now, I got to say, I have a fascination with George Santos. I don't know what it is. I know he's an idiot. I know stuff like that. I don't know what it is about George Santos. He's like this camp, right, gay guy in the MAGA movement who just doesn't fit the MAGA movement. And he's like, he lies about everything. He lies about being Jewish. He lies about and then a while ago, he posted he posted out that if Zoran Mandani wins, because George Santos lives in New York, if Zoran Mandani wins, he's leaving New York, right? He's leaving New York. So obviously Zoran Mandani has now won, right? So, and the reason he said he's leaving New York is because he said that crime will go up, right? So I love this guy. So basically, he's posting out that he's going to leave New York. So a convicted criminal. So George Santos is a convicted criminal who is going to leave New York because Zoran Mandani getting elected is going to create more crime. Like, you know, this man is. I've got to say, I don't know if he's doing it on purpose, but to me, he encapsulates the whole comical part of the MAGA movement. Right? He just makes me laugh. Here you have someone who was supposed to serve 7 years in jail, who stole from Trump supporters, right? Trump supporters, right? Stole from Trump supporters. He gets let out after only serving 3 months by Trump. And then he's on Twitter. He's tweeting 20 times a day. He's like a professional tweeter now, right? 20 times a day. All about, he's worried about crime. He's worried about Zoran Mandani bringing in more crime. He wants to defund the police. And this guy's a criminal. He's a criminal. The best thing Zoran Mandani could do, the best thing that I think George Santos could do to stop crime and to reduce crime is to actually leave the state, and then there would be less crime, and maybe pay back the $350,000 that he still owes $350,000 to the people he stole from, right? And because he commuted his sentence, he doesn't have to pay the $350,000 anymore. So he doesn't have to pay any of the money back. Yet on Twitter every day, I have a bit of an obsession with this guy. I don't know what it is. And because you know what it is? I think if I was at a club and I was drinking, right, and I was like having a few drinks, and he wasn't like the ex-governor, he wasn't like a Republican guy, he was just some guy in there, I'd probably like have a bit of a joke with him. Do you know what I mean? He'd be telling me like, my parents were the Queen of England, my dad was this, I'm Jewish, I'm this, my parents were millionaires, I was a really good volleyball player. And I would find that hilarious. If I was in a nightclub and someone was telling, and I would know it's a lie, and I would just find it hilarious. I think this person is a funny person, right? It would just be hilarious. And so I just find him a fascinating person. I think Netflix should do like a 10-part series about him. I really do. I mean, he in some ways encapsulates the whole MAGA movement to me, right? They talk about crime all the time, and yet most of them are criminals, right? Donald Trump is a criminal that talks about crime. George Santos is a criminal that talks about crime, right? They all talk about crime. Trump pardons white-collar criminals day in, day out. It's a big thing, right? And then he says, I don't know. I've never heard of that guy. I don't know who he is. I don't know who he is. My sons told me that that crypto guy was a good guy to pardon, right? Like, could you imagine Joe Biden saying, well, I pardoned that guy because Hunter Biden said it was a good thing to do, right? Because George Santos should be glad he sold out to prison, disappear, bring back 15 minutes of fame. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, that's the thing. Like, he's just like this crazy person. To me, he's like not real. He can't, like, I don't believe George Santos can be real. And he, in some ways, I don't want to be insulting about America. He's so American. He's so New York and so American in some ways. I don't know what it is. I'm just saying, like he's like interesting. He's contradictory. He's the other thing. The other post I loved about him. The other post I loved because he pretended he was Jewish, but he's not actually Jewish. Like me, I'm actually Jewish. No, I'm not. Like, yeah, they're all going to come after me now. And then basically he was pretending he was Jewish, right? And then he was pretending he was Jewish for years, and then he admitted he wasn't actually Jewish. And then when Zoran Mandani won the primary, he said, I said, oh, well, this isn't going to be good for me and my family. And then I was thinking, now he didn't say it was because they're Jewish, but I was thinking, why is he saying Zoran Mandani winning the primary isn't good for him and his family? Because a lot of the stuff around Zoran Mandani is that he's an anti-Semite, right? So I was thinking, is he still pretending to be Jewish? And then his family is Jewish? Because that's actually not a true thing. And yet, I can't. It's just, it's amazing. Now, people will criticize me in America for being obsessed with American politics. But how can I not be obsessed with American politics when you have stuff like this? Like it's impossible. We don't have this in Australia, and so I'm sorry, but it's just it's like good. Thanks for the laughs as always. That's all right. Thanks, Sandra. And yeah, I just think it's like I can't not be obsessed. Stop making people like Trump and George Santos and Dr. Phil going around with ice, right? You stop making those things happen, and I'll stop being fascinated by American politics. I can't. When I see Dr. Phil walking around with ice, asking people why they came to America and giving them like psychological help, like these are like people who've just been working at Home Depot. This is not normal, right? And you can't criticize other people for not wanting to see that. You can't not see he's a walking episode of South Park. Yeah, he is. He is absolutely crazy times. So I have to go. I've had so much fun. Thank you, everybody. Sandra, everyone, Nicole, everyone. Thank you so, David, everyone, Coral. Thank you so much. It is a country of contradictions, Coral. It reminds me a little bit of Japan in some ways. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Marnie. Again, that I'm not sure isn't making it happen. It's like watching a train wreck. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Donna. Thank you so much, everyone. You can upload the video later. And if you liked it, when I upload the video, if you want to help me, just retweet it, restack it, and like it, maybe comment on it. It helps me get more people to see it. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.